Examples of corporations that failed to understand the market. Number 10, BlackBerry. BlackBerry was all the rage in the late 90s and early 2000s. They're one of those phones that had all the buttons on the outside, but what they offered was really high-level encryption. This is what the president used when they had a BlackBerry in their hand talking at press conferences. The reality is BlackBerry was a great piece of hardware and really reliable from a security standpoint, but dog shit awful when it came to user experience. When you had the iPhone hit the market in 2007, it essentially put the BlackBerry to shame because the BlackBerry was only good for one thing, which was rapid texting, but not a user experience of surfing the internet, engaging on social media, and doing a million other things that nobody ever thought your phones would do. BlackBerry isn't a thing anymore, nobody talks about it, and the reality is they had the opportunity to innovate within their marketplace and chose not to. Number 11, MySpace. One of the biggest failures in social marketing or social networks that has ever been. MySpace was the biggest social community in the early to mid 2000s. The goal was that this was a place where you could customize everything on your page, you could put a million things out there, you can connect with strangers, friends, before people ever did that on the internet. This was way before Facebook. In 2005, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg met with the founder of MySpace and offered him $75 million for a platform that was losing a ton of traction. And essentially MySpace said no. The reality is MySpace lost out because there was two different models that really worked well for Facebook. It was the exclusivity of only students can be a part of this network, so you don't have a bunch of other people coming in and making it weird, which is one thing. And the other was lack of customization, simplicity, and the view of a platform that allowed you to do only a few things, but very simplistically. Number 12, Sears. Sears was the go-to hardware store. At some point, I remember being a kid going to Sears and getting free donuts while looking at different things, different tools, all kinds of hardware stuff with my dad. The reality is, Sears was the epitome of big box store. Unfortunately, as Amazon and some of these other online marketplaces came about, there was no place to go in and browse and shop. Nobody wanted that. And the reality was every Christmas where Black Friday, people went from the red into the black, Sears consistently lost money. Sears continues to now announce store closings on a regular basis. And unless they change their model and having something in the way of a more immersive experience in store, they're going to continue to lose traction. Number 13, Macy's. Macy's was the premium store within New York and then beyond throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and part of the early 2000s. There's a reason that during Thanksgiving there's the Macy's Day Parade. That might be Easter or Christmas, but shit, they do like 3 of them. The reality is Macy's are closing and going out of business at scale because they're gigantic real estate areas where nobody's actually going in and buying anything. A lot of people started going to Macy's in order to shop for new products only to go and buy them online later at Amazon. Macy's, JCPenney's, and Sears at this point are struggling to try to catch up to online marketplaces. And while they are learning from H&M and some of these fast fashion manufacturers, they're still losing out at scale because they have so much overhead with large, giant facilities and also, large stores. It's a thing. Number 14, Hitachi. Hitachi actually used to be a sister organization of Sony. The reality was this was a Japanese manufacturing firm that made all the latest cutting edge technology. They did cameras, they did laptops, they did personal massagers, they did everything, but unfortunately they couldn't find one area to excel at. Over time, Hitachi has lost major areas of the marketplace because they haven't found their footing. And the reality is nobody's talking about their new Hitachi plasma TV anymore. Nobody's talking about their Hitachi headphones. Unfortunately, they haven't doubled down on the newest technology and actually tried to excel at it. They try to do everything for too long, too much, and they're still trying to find their place in the market. Number 15, Polaroid. Polaroid cameras were all the rage in the 70s, 80s, and sometimes if you're a 90s kid, you might have remembered them. You shoot the camera and then a piece of physical film pops out. Now they've had a resurgence over a number of years as kind of a kitschy, fun thing where you can stick stickers up, but the reality is they lost major market share because they didn't decide to go into a digital technology. Unfortunately, Polaroid is nothing more than kind of a hipster trend that resurges every 5 to 10 years. Now it would be nice for them to look at some different revenue models, but the reality is Polaroids are old school and I don't think anybody's really looking at them as a future trend maker. Number 16, Toshiba. Toshiba was the manufacturer when it came to laptops. They were excelling across all fronts. They were a major competitor to Intel for their computer chips. These guys were cutting edge. Nothing was more, frankly, amazing than the new technology coming out of Toshiba. They made telephones, they made TVs, they made all kinds of devices. Unfortunately, they decided that they couldn't figure out what area to go in and excel at, so they started stripping off areas of their best performing markets. Nobody understands how bad that is until you actually look at your old Toshiba laptop. They stopped making them back in the late 2000s. Unfortunate, but that's the case. Toshiba doesn't even make chips anymore. They're still trying to figure out where to go within the marketplace, and who knows if they'll be around the next 5 to 10 years. Number 17, RadioShack. RadioShack started in the 1920s. They were one of the first electronic manufacturers / storefronts. They made their own products as a competitor to some of the biggest brands out there. And the reality was, when you needed speaker wire, when you needed a small electronic device, something in the way of maybe a radio or boombox, you went to RadioShack. RadioShack started missing out on a major part of the marketplace when they avoided not only the online stuff, but they avoided going big. You have Best Buy, Circuit City was in there for a little while. Large manufacturers, and also really big spaces for people to go experience and see the technology that was coming out. Personal technology is now online, and by the way, most of the stuff that your cell phone does is essentially all the different products that RadioShack was selling, whether it was personal PC, or your phone, or a radio. So it's unfortunately tragic, but a lot of these stores have gone the way of the dinosaur. Number 18, Motorola. Everybody that I know at some point had a flip phone, whether it was the Razor phone or just something that you ended up picking up and you could see who was calling on the outside. These were the phones that were relatively cheap to manufacture and ended up hitting everybody within the marketplace. The reality is that they didn't innovate over time. As soon as Apple's iPhone came out and Steve Jobs took the stage showing that people could swipe and do all these interesting things across their phone, Motorola was losing traction almost immediately. Nobody has a Motorola phone anymore, at least nobody that I know. So the reality is they're not a major player in the marketplace, and they're still trying to figure out new ways to innovate, but they're still putting out products, which is still admirable. My name's Taylor Ryan. I put out a ton of content. Like and subscribe. I run a growth hacking agency in Copenhagen, Denmark. Make sure to subscribe to see more of this stuff.